I remember the night as though it were yesterday, an evening that seemed so ordinary at the time, so calm, so peaceful. The kind of night where everything felt right in the world. But, in hindsight, I know that the calm was just the stillness before the storm. It was the night my world broke apart, the night that would change everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. At the time I had everything, or so it seemed. A beautiful home, a loving husband, a baby girl who filled every corner of my heart with joy. Life was supposed to be perfect. We were a family, a unit, a picture of happiness. But somewhere, beneath the surface, things had begun to crack. I just hadn't seen it yet. I remember feeling a sense of peace that night, even as I sat alone in the quiet house, with my baby asleep in the next room. I was calm, but in the pit of my stomach, there was a gnawing feeling, a sense that something was off, something wasn't right. It's funny how sometimes we can sense it before it even hits us, how the smallest things can make us feel uneasy, even when everything seems normal. As I looked at my baby, I tried to push away the thoughts, tried to ignore the ache in my chest. But that's when I saw Eton's old family photo, the three of us smiling together, happy and whole. It used to make me smile, but now, it made my heart ache. I couldn't shake the feeling that the man standing next to me in that picture, the man I had trusted more than anyone in the world, was no longer the person I thought he was. He was out there, somewhere, celebrating his lover's birthday, while I sat here alone, caring for our child. Alone in a house that once felt like home, but now seemed so cold. He was out there, living a life I wasn't a part of anymore. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of the end, the moment everything I had believed about us started to unravel. The night I would come to realize that love, as I had known it, wasn't enough to hold us together. It wasn't until later that I would understand the depth of the betrayal. But that night, as I looked out the window into the darkened world, I knew something had changed, something irreversible. It was as if the universe had decided that my world, our world, was about to be shattered, and I wouldn't even have the chance to say goodbye. The hours stretched into a long, restless night, but sleep wouldn't come. How could it? I kept thinking about him, my husband, the man I thought I knew, the one I had loved more than anyone else. But that night, something inside me began to crack. I had no idea where he was, or what he was doing, but I could feel it, the cold distance between us, the silence that spoke louder than words. He wasn't home, and I was alone with our baby, trying to piece together the evening, trying to make sense of the emptiness in my heart. It wasn't until my phone buzzed that everything shifted. At first, I thought it was just another meaningless message, maybe from a friend or a work colleague. But when I saw the name attached to the text, I froze. It was from an unknown number, a woman I didn't recognize. My fingers hovered over the screen, my pulse quickening, unsure whether to open it. But I did, and when I saw the photo, my entire world seemed to tilt. There he was, my husband, smiling, his arm around another woman, her head resting against his shoulder. The two of them looked so happy, so comfortable together. The caption read, "Happy birthday to the love of my life." Beneath that, the words stung me like a slap. "I'm so lucky to have you here with me. Wish you were here, baby." It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The reality of Ith wasn't just out there somewhere. He was with her, celebrating, living a life that didn't include me. While I had been sitting alone in our house, trying to keep everything together for our daughter, he was out there, building memories with someone else. A cold, bitter realization washed over me, and my breath caught in my throat. How had I missed it all? How had I not seen the signs, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the sudden distance between us, the nagging feeling that something wasn't right, the moments when I felt like I was living in a house with a stranger? I had dismissed it all, told myself it was just stress, just life getting in the way. But now, staring at this picture, it was all too clear. The next few hours felt like they stretched into eternity. I couldn't stop thinking about the betrayal. I couldn't stop thinking about the life I had built, the promises made, the future we had talked about, all of it shattered in an instant. I tried to hold on to the hope that maybe this was all some misunderstanding, some mistake. But deep down, I knew. He wasn't coming back. He wasn't going to fix this. And I was left with nothing but questions about him, about myself, and about everything I thought we had. I sat there in the silence, my baby asleep in the next room, while the weight of the truth pressed down on me. My life, the life I thought was perfect, was unraveling right before my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I had loved him. I had trusted him. But now, I was just another woman in a house full of memories that no longer felt like mine. The pain I felt that night wasn't just the sting of betrayal. It was the sharp, suffocating weight of abandonment. He wasn't just physically absent, was emotionally gone too. I had always believed in the strength of our relationship, in the foundation we built together. But now, as I sat in the empty house, staring at the silent phone, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. He had left me, not just for her, but for something I could never give him. Something that no amount of love or sacrifice would ever fill. I couldn't even bring myself to reach out to him. What was the point? I had already been lied to, deceived, and now, even my voice seemed foreign in the silence. He had made his choice. And it wasn't me. It wasn't us. It was her, this woman who had somehow become his priority, his love, the one who had stolen him away from me. My mind raced, swirling with 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. How long had this been going on? Had it started long before that night? Was I just too blind to see the cracks? The thought of all those years together, now tainted, made my stomach turn. We had been happy. Or so I thought. How could he smile, hold her close, while I was here, trying to hold our world together, trying to make it work, trying to believe in something that had already died? I stood up, pacing the room, as the reality of what I was facing set in. My thoughts grew darker, more desperate. What was I supposed to do now? How could I raise our daughter on my own, knowing that the one person I thought I could count on had chosen to walk away from everything we built? The house felt smaller now, suffocating even. I wanted to scream, to break something, but what would that solve? He wasn't here to hear me. He wasn't here for any of it. The thought of my baby innocent, unaware of the chaos unfolding around her, cut through my grief. I couldn't let her see me like this. She deserved better. She deserved a mother who could be strong, who could hold it all together, even when the world felt like it was falling apart. But how could I? How could I keep pretending that everything was okay when my heart was shattering, piece by piece? I grabbed my phone again, staring at the photo, the cruel reminder of my husband's betrayal. I wanted to delete it, to throw the phone across the room, but I couldn't. It was the only piece of the truth I had left. The only tangible evidence that the life I thought I knew had never been real at all. The night dragged on, and with each passing hour, my anger grew, but so did my sense of helplessness. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but what good would it do? The words that had once meant everything to me, words of love, of promises, of forever, had already been replaced by lies. There was nothing left to salvage, nothing left to hold on to. That's when I realized I had to let go. I had to let go of him, of the life we once had, because I could no longer live in the shadow of his betrayal. I couldn't keep waiting for a man who wasn't coming back. I had to find my own way, for my daughter's sake, for my own. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But in that moment, I knew it was the only way forward. The days that followed were a blur, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Every morning, I woke up with a hollow feeling in my chest, the weight of everything that had happened still heavy in the air. I would look at my baby, her innocent face untouched by the betrayal, and for a moment, I would feel a flicker of something, hope, maybe, but it always faded just as quickly as it appeared. How could I give her the best of me when the best of me had been destroyed? How could I give her the best of me when the best of me had been destroyed? I didn't know where to begin. I didn't know how to piece together the fragments of myself that had been left behind. The woman I had been, the strong, loving wife and mother, felt like a distant memory. The realization that I had been living a lie, that I had given everything to a man who had never truly been mine, crushed me, but I wasn't about to let it break me. Not completely. I spent the first few days in a daze, barely able to function. I avoided calls from friends, from family, anyone who might ask the questions I didn't have answers for. I couldn't talk to anyone about it, not yet. I needed to figure out how to survive this on my own first. So, I focused on my daughter. She needed me. In her tiny, perfect world, nothing had changed. Her love for me was unconditional, her trust in me was absolute, and for that, I couldn't fall apart. But the grief, the anger, the confusion, they lingered, gnawing at me, pulling me down into a place I didn't want to go. Every corner of our home was filled with reminders of him. The empty side of the bed, the clothes in the closet that still smelled like him, the shared spaces that no longer felt like they belonged to us, but to some shadow of a life I no longer recognized. I knew he wasn't coming back, not after what had happened. The damage was done. But the harder part was knowing that I had invested so much of myself into someone who had never truly loved me the way I loved him. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the cracks in our foundation? Was I that desperate for love, that desperate to keep a family together, even at the cost of my own happiness? The questions swirled, and each one felt like a slap across the face. There were moments when I felt weak, moments when the temptation to reach out to him, to beg for answers, became overwhelming. But I reminded myself that I deserved better than that. I didn't need his explanations. I didn't need his apologies. I had been more than enough for him, and if he couldn't see that, it wasn't my problem anymore. The hardest part was learning to trust myself again. I had spent so much time questioning everything about my marriage, about him, about us. But now, I had to learn to trust the woman I had become, the woman who had survived the worst night of her life and was still standing. I had to believe in my own strength. One night, after I put my daughter to bed, I stood in front of the mirror. My reflection seemed foreign, the person I saw there both familiar and strange. I had lost so much, but I wasn't gone. I was still here, still breathing, still capable of love. I wasn't broken. Not completely. Not yet. I made a decision then. I would rebuild. Not just for my daughter, but for myself. I would find a way to heal, to let go of the anger, to move past the betrayal. It wouldn't be easy. But I had to start somewhere. And as much as I had loved him, I realized something: he wasn't the one I needed to survive anymore. I was. The first steps toward healing weren't easy. I had to learn how to live without the constant shadow of him hanging over me, without his presence defining every part of my day. The house, once filled with the sounds of laughter and love, now echoed with silence. And yet, in that silence, I began to find myself again. The woman who had been buried under layers of pain and betrayal started to emerge, one small step at a time. I threw myself into caring for my daughter. She became my anchor, my reason to keep going, even when the days felt unbearably long. The first few months were the hardest. I had moments of despair, when I thought the weight of it all would crush me. I would cry in the middle of the night, when the world outside was still, and I could allow myself to feel the full depth of my loss. But each morning, I woke up and did it all over again. I put on a smile for her, even when my heart was breaking, because I knew she needed me to be strong, to show her what resilience looked like. But something changed. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, I began to feel something new, something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It came in small moments. When I watched my daughter take her first steps, when I saw her laugh at something simple, when I realized that I could still find joy in the smallest things. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine to rebuild. I also started to reconnect with myself. I hadn't realized how much I had lost along the way: the passions, the dreams, the woman I had been before he came into my life. I had allowed myself to be consumed by the role of wife and mother, and somewhere in that, I had forgotten who I was as an individual. But now, with him gone, I had the space to rediscover what made me happy, what made me feel alive again. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. It felt like the brush in my hand was a lifeline, pulling me out of the darkness, showing me the colors I had forgotten. I took long walks on the beach, letting the salty air fill my lungs, reminding myself that I was still here, still breathing, still capable of change. I signed up for a photography class, something I had always wanted to do but had put off. Slowly, piece by piece, I began to rebuild my life, not for anyone else, but for me. And as I did, I started to forgive. Not him; he had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even fully understand. But I began to forgive myself. I forgave myself for the mistakes I had made, for the way I had ignored the signs, for not loving myself enough to see that I deserved more. I forgave myself for allowing his actions to define my worth. Because in the end, I realized that I was enough. I was worthy of love, of happiness, of respect. And if he couldn't see that, it wasn't my problem anymore. I remember one day, standing on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset with my daughter in my arms. The sky was painted with shades of pink and orange, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. I had come so far since that night, the night I thought would break me, but instead, it had forged me into something stronger. The woman who had lost everything had found a way to rebuild from the ashes, and in doing so, had become more than she had ever been before. I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I had learned that I was whole, just as I was. And as I looked out over the horizon, I realized something else. My journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. I had a life to live, a future to create, and I was going to do it on my own terms. As the weeks turned into months, the pain of the betrayal slowly began to fade, though it never fully disappeared. I had come to accept that my healing wouldn't be linear. Some days, the memories would rush back, sharp and vivid, making me question how I had let myself be so blind. Other days, I would feel a deep sense of calm, as if the storm inside me had finally passed. But in the quiet moments, I understood something important. The healing was happening. Not all at once, not in a grand, sweeping way, but in small, significant pieces. Each day, I was getting closer to the woman I had been before, and perhaps even to a version of myself who was stronger, more self-aware, and more resilient than I had ever imagined. It wasn't easy, and I'd be lying if I said I never thought about him. There were nights when I wondered if I would ever get over the anger, if I would ever stop questioning why he had done it, why he had chosen someone else over me. But eventually, I realized that those questions didn't matter anymore. The answers weren't going to change the reality I faced. I could spend the rest of my life searching for answers from him, but all I would ever get was more pain. And I was done with that. One afternoon, I found myself at a park, watching my daughter run around with other children. She was laughing, her little face glowing with happiness, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel that same sense of joy. I wasn't a victim of my circumstances. I was a mother. I was a woman. I was my own person. And in that moment, I realized that I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. I could feel the liberation settling in, as though each step I took away from the past was a step toward freedom. He had tried to hold me back with his lies, his infidelity, his betrayal. But now, I was free. I didn't have to carry the weight of his mistakes anymore. I didn't have to be tied to a version of love that had never truly been mine. I could walk away from the broken pieces and start over, one step at a time. The first time I truly felt the weight of that freedom was when I finally took down the family photos, the ones that had once been a source of comfort, now a painful reminder of what I had lost. I replaced them with new pictures, photos of me and my daughter, moments of pure happiness, of us building a new life together. They were just images, but for me, they symbolized something more. They were a representation of everything I had overcome, everything I had fought for. They marked the beginning of my new chapter, one where I was the author of my own story, where I controlled the narrative. I wasn't perfect, and I wasn't healed completely, but I was stronger than I had ever been. And when I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I saw a woman who had been broken but had learned to rebuild herself. A woman who had loved deeply, been hurt deeply, but had found a way to keep going, to keep growing. I had come through the storm, and now, I was ready for whatever came next. I thought about the future, what it would look like, how I would navigate the world as a single mother, how I would rebuild trust and love. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel lost. I felt empowered. I knew that I had the strength to face anything that came my way. The pain of the past would always be there, but it no longer defined me. I was my own person now, and nothing could take that away. It's funny, isn't it? How life can change so drastically in the blink of an eye. One moment, you're living a life you thought was perfect, surrounded by people you love, and the next, everything shatters, and you're left picking up the pieces of your heart. But that's the thing about life, it doesn't stop. It doesn't wait for you to get ready. It moves forward, whether you're ready or not. And somewhere, along the way, I learned that I had to move with it. The hardest part about moving on isn't the anger or the sadness. It's the fear of the unknown. The fear that maybe, just maybe, you'll never find the happiness you once had. But then, you wake up one day, and the fear doesn't feel as heavy. The sadness doesn't consume you the way it used to, and you realize you've survived. You've made it through the darkest part of your life, and the world is still out there, waiting for you. It wasn't an easy journey. There were days when I felt weak, when I wondered if I would ever truly heal. There were nights when I cried, wishing things could go back to the way they were, when I could still feel his arms around me, when I believed in the promises we made to each other. But the truth was, those promises had been broken long ago. And though it hurt more than anything I'd ever experienced, I had to accept that. But in accepting the truth, I also began to understand something beautiful. I could still love. Not just others, but myself. I could love myself fiercely, in a way that I had never done before. I could forgive myself for the mistakes I had made and stop blaming myself for someone else's betrayal. I wasn't defined by what he had done to me, or by the love I had given to him. I was defined by my strength, my resilience, my ability to rise from the ashes, stronger than before. My daughter was my constant reminder of what truly mattered. She gave me a reason to keep moving, to keep fighting. As I watched her grow, I realized that I was teaching her something far more valuable than any lesson I could impart with words. I was teaching her how to live with grace in the face of pain, how to stand tall when the world tries to knock you down. I was teaching her that no matter what happens, you are never broken. You are never too far gone to rebuild. In the quiet moments, when it was just the two of us, I often thought about the woman I had been before everything fell apart. She was naive, yes, but she was also full of hope, full of love, full of dreams. And as I looked at the woman I had become, I realized she wasn't much different. She still had dreams. She still had hope. She was just wiser now. She knew that life was unpredictable, that love could be fleeting, but she also knew that she was stronger than anything the world could throw at her. I had reclaimed my life now because I had to, but because I chose to. I chose to heal. I chose to forgive. I chose to live for myself and for my daughter. I chose to move forward. There would be days when I thought about him, when I wondered what he was doing, if he ever thought about me, about what we had. But those days became less frequent. Because I realized something. The love we once shared had faded, and while I would always cherish the good memories, I no longer needed him to complete me. I had completed myself. I was free. And as I stood on the edge of this new chapter of my life, with the sun setting on a world of possibilities, I realized that I had everything I needed right here within me. The love, the strength, the courage to keep moving forward. I wasn't waiting for someone else to save me. I had saved myself. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready. Ready for everything that came next, ready to embrace the new dawn, knowing that the best was yet to come.